Have you ever been confronted by HOAs who think they can crush your dreams? Today, I'm going to show you 3 incredible stories where ordinary people, Mike with his cars, James with his family land, and Michael with his beloved garden, fight back against Karen's tyranny and their crazy rules. Secret plans, legal bombshells, and sweet revenge that gives you goosebumps. Want to find out how they outsmarted the system and regained their freedom? Write in the comments where you watch this and give it a like if you're ready for an epic battle for justice. Let's go. They thought they could crush me with that glaring orange slip slapped on my front door, but they had no idea I'd been sharpening my edge for years. I'm Mike Harper, a guy who loves his cars, my pride and joy. A sleek orange Lamborghini Aventador sits gleaming in my driveway alongside my custom Ford F-150 and my wife's sleek Mercedes. But when Karen Miller, our HOA's iron-fisted president, slapped me with a $600 monthly fee hike for excessive vehicles, I knew the gloves were off. 3 incredible machines, all legally mine, were now the target of her petty tyranny. If you've ever felt the sting of an HOA breathing down your neck, you get it. Smash that subscribe button if you want to see how I revved up to take down Karen, because this ride's just beginning. I've called Elmwood Lane home for 12 years, living here with my wife, Emily, and our son, Jake. It used to be a place where kids raced bikes and neighbors traded waves until Karen took the HOA reins 5 years ago. She turned it into her personal fiefdom, fining Mrs. Davis $200 for her 2 vibrant garden gnomes and hitting Mr. Patel with a notice for parking his motorcycle a hair over his line. I've always been a car guy, building my collection over the years, my Lamborghini, a symbol of my hard work and contracting, alongside the F-150 for jobs and Emily's Mercedes for her nursing shifts. Jake's beat-up Chevy, a gift for his 18th birthday last month, rounded out the lineup. But that Tuesday morning, as I tore that orange notice off my door, my stomach churned with a mix of fury and disbelief. Immediate fee increase, $600 monthly. Violation, excessive vehicles on property. I read it twice, my pulse racing. Excessive? These were my babies. I stormed into the kitchen, the paper crumpling in my grip, and found Emily sipping her coffee. "Babe, look at this," I said, my voice tight. She glanced over, her eyes widening as she scanned the words. $600? For your cars? That's outrageous, she gasped, her voice trembling with indignation. We'd laid it all out at the last meeting. My Lamborghini and F-150 for my business, her Mercedes for the hospital, and Jake's Chevy for his new job. It wasn't a junkyard. It was our passion and necessity. Emily's brow furrowed, a flicker of worry in her eyes. "Maybe park the Chevy in the garage?" she suggested softly. "Not a chance," I snapped, slapping the notice down. "We're not tucking tail like we're ashamed. The garage is stuffed with my tools and your supplies, they know that." I edged to the window, peeking through the blinds, and there she was, Karen Miller, marching down the street with her pink clipboard, her blonde hair in that rigid bun, and that smirk she wore like a crown. She halted at my driveway, whipped out her phone, and started snapping shots of my Lamborghini. Again, 5th time this week. My chest tightened, but I gripped the counter, forcing my anger down. Karen had been on my case since I challenged her last fee hike. "Rules are rules, Mike," she'd sneered, barely glancing up from her phone. "Maybe if you can't handle the standards, you should sell that flashy car collection." Her jab had stung, but I'd held back until now. What Karen didn't suspect, what no one knew, was my secret play. For 6 years, I'd been scooping up properties in Elmwood Lane through my shell company, Harper Motors Realty. It started as an investment, a way to fund my car passion, but it morphed into a mission. Every house for sale, I'd snag it under a different LLC, keeping my name off the radar. By last month, I owned 77% of the neighborhood, over 50 homes, without a whisper of suspicion. I'd attended every HOA meeting incognito, sending proxies to log Karen's every move. Her selective finds, her midnight prowls, her shady deals with her inner circle. It was all stashed in a locked drawer in my office. That afternoon, I stepped outside to grab the mail, my mind buzzing. Karen pretended to fuss over Mrs. Davis's roses across the street, but her sidelong glance betrayed her. Poor Mrs. Davis had been dinged $150 last week for overly bright petunias. My phone vibrated, a text from my lawyer, Rachel Brooks. "Closing complete on 142 Elmwood. You're at 77% now." A grin tugged at my lips as I pocketed it. Karen power-walked toward me, her heels clacking like a countdown. "Mike Harper," she purred, her tone laced with venom, "I trust you got our notice about the vehicle violation?" I nodded, keeping my cool. I did, Karen. I've got questions about the legal grounds for this fee. She flicked her hand dismissively. The board has full power. Maybe if you showed up to meetings, you'd get it. Her smile was ice, but I knew the truth. I'd been there, watching her reign unfold. As she spun to leave, she called back. Oh, emergency meeting tonight at 7 p.m. sharp. We're tackling problem properties. I watched her fade down the street, my heart thumping. Tonight was my opening. I headed inside, unrolling the property maps on my desk, each lot marked in green. 6 years of strategy, of collecting dirt on Karen's tyranny, were about to pay off. My phone rang, Mrs. Patel, choking back tears over a new notice for her grandson's skateboard ramp. As I listened, my eyes landed on a photo of my dad, beaming by his first house before an HOA crushed him 20 years ago. He taught me to outsmart, not outfight. I checked my watch, 5 hours to go. Karen wanted to flex over my car collection? She had no clue what was roaring her way. I slammed the property maps down on my desk, my heart pounding like a drum as I stared at the green-marked empire I'd built over 6 years. My orange Lamborghini Aventador sat outside, its sleek curves glowing under the afternoon sun, a fiery symbol of everything I'd fought for, everything Karen was trying to rip away. I wasn't just a guy with a driveway full of cars. My custom Ford F-150, Emily's Mercedes, and Jake's Chevy were pieces of our life, our dreams, our victories. But now, with that $600 fee burning a hole in my mind, I felt the rage bubbling up like lava. Karen had pushed me too far, and tonight, I'd make sure she regretted it. I clenched my fists, my knuckles whitening, as I swore to myself, this ends now. I grabbed my phone, my hands still shaking from Mrs. Patel's call. Her voice had been raw with pain. $250 for her grandson's skateboard ramp? A kid's toy. Mike, I can't keep up with her fines, she'd sobbed, and I'd felt her despair like a punch to the gut. I'd promised her change, my voice steady, but inside, I was a storm. Karen had been a thorn in Elmwood Lane's side for 5 years, and I'd seen her cruelty up close from the start. I'd never forget the day she fined Mr. Henderson $300 for his Christmas lights he couldn't take down because he was in the hospital, barely able to walk. I'd watched her smirk as he begged for mercy, her cold voice slicing through the room. Standards, Mike. We have standards. That was the day I started planning, the day I swore I'd take her down. Karen's reign was a nightmare. She targeted anyone who didn't fit her cookie-cutter vision. Single moms like Sarah Jenkins got slammed with double fines, while her cronies, like Susan Carter with her rule-breaking purple mailbox, walked free. I'd been there for it all, sending proxies to every HOA meeting, my blood boiling as they recorded Karen's smug laughter about teaching people a lesson. I had a mountain of dirt on her, 32 neighbor complaints, time-stamped footage of her late-night prowls, even emails where she bragged about her power trips. But my real weapon? I owned 77% of this neighborhood, over 50 homes, bought under the radar through Harper Motors Realty. Karen had no idea who she was messing with. I glanced at the clock, 4 p.m. 3 hours until the meeting, and I was buzzing with adrenaline. I yanked open my laptop, my fingers flying as I pulled up last week's security footage. There she was, Karen, at 2 a.m., skulking around my yard like a thief, her flashlight bouncing as she measured my grass with a ruler. She'd even zoomed in on Jake's Chevy, probably to prove it hadn't moved. My jaw tightened, a smirk tugging at my lips as I pictured her face when I'd play this tonight. Oh, she'd squirm. But that was just the appetizer. I opened another file, HOA financial records I dug up through a county contact. Karen had been siphoning funds for years, $50,000 for a pool renovation that never happened, while Susan Carter's backyard got a shiny new deck. I had bank statements, emails, even a screenshot of Karen gloating on her private Facebook group. Another smart investment, thanks to HOA fees. My lawyer, Rachel, had called it a goldmine. I called it justice. I stood, my chest heaving, and stormed to the garage to clear my head. The smell of oil and metal hit me, grounding me as my eyes landed on my Lamborghini's empty spot. If we'd caved to Karen, it'd be hidden away like some dirty secret. I thought of Jake, my boy, working late at the diner to save for college, his Chevy a symbol of his grit. Then I pictured Karen circling my Aventador like a shark, her measuring tape out, ready to slap another fine on my passion. That car wasn't just a machine. It was every late night on a job site, every sacrifice to give my family a better life. Karen wasn't just attacking my driveway. She was attacking my soul. Emily poked her head in, her voice trembling with worry. Mike, you sure about this? Karen's got her loyalists. What if they don't listen? I spun around, my eyes blazing with determination as I grabbed her hand. They'll listen, Em. I've got the proof, the votes, everything. She's done. Emily bit her lip, her eyes searching mine, but I could see the spark of hope behind her fear. She'd felt Karen's wrath too, last Halloween, a $100 fine for our 2 spooky jack-o'-lanterns. It was absurd, but it was personal. I spent the next hour printing documents, my pulse racing as I organized my arsenal. Every page was a weapon, every photo a dagger. I wasn't just fighting for my cars, I was fighting for Mrs. Patel's grandson, for Mr. Henderson's dignity, for every neighbor Karen had crushed. My phone buzzed, Jake again. Dad, Karen's back, snapping pics of the lumbo. She's got a clipboard now. I growled under my breath, picturing her smug face as she circled my pride and joy. That was it. I threw on a crisp shirt, my tie a battle flag, and grabbed my briefcase. The sun was setting, painting Elmwood Lane in fiery hues that matched my mood. 1 hour to go. I kissed Emily, her touch a quiet anchor in my storm. I've got this, I said, my voice steel. I stepped outside, the evening air crackling with tension, and glanced at my Aventador one last time. Tonight, Karen would learn what happens when you poke a man who's ready to roar. I marched into the Elmwood Lane Community Center with a purpose, my briefcase swinging like a pendulum of power, my tie a bold stripe across my chest. The room hummed with tension, every chair filled with familiar faces, Mrs. Davis clutching her purse, Mr. Patel scribbling furiously, Sarah Jenkins murmuring to her sister. They'd all felt Karen's iron grip, but tonight, I was here to shatter it. I straightened my shoulders, a confident grin tugging at my lips as I locked eyes with Karen at the podium. She thought her $600 fee for my car collection had me on the ropes, but she was dead wrong. I was about to steer this ship. I slid into a back row seat, my posture radiating control. 6 years of planning had led to this, and I wasn't about to blink. Karen wrapped her sparkly pink gavel, her voice slicing through the buzz like a whip. Let's begin, she declared, her blonde bun so tight it seemed to strain. She'd pulled out all the stops, hiring a photographer to snap my driveway, projecting the images on a screen as if I'd turned it into a junkyard. My prized cars glowed in the shots, a testament to my hard work, but she twisted it into a crime. As you can see, she sneered, her tone thick with contempt, Mr. Harper's property has become an eyesore with those excessive vehicles parked out front. A few of her cronies, Susan Carter and her crew, gasped on command, but I caught Mrs. Rodriguez rolling her eyes. She'd been fined last month for her grandson's bike being too noticeable. I leaned back, arms folded, my grin widening with every word. Karen had no clue what was about to hit her. She droned on, flipping through slides of evidence, charts claiming my cars were dragging down property values, anonymous complaints, likely from Susan, even a weather report pinning excess snowdrifts on my driveway. The ridiculousness fueled my fire, but I held my ground, my confidence unshakable. I'd watched her pull these stunts before, last year. She'd targeted Mr. Chin for his too exotic garden, calling it a blight. But tonight wasn't her stage, it was mine. Karen hauled out a thick binder, her voice climbing with fake outrage. I've tracked every vehicle entering and leaving Mr. Harper's property for 3 months, she boasted, waving it like a scepter. My eyebrows lifted, but I didn't flinch. She'd been spying on my family? Neighbors shifted, their whispers swelling into a restless hum. Sarah Jenkins rose, her voice shaky but bold. Karen, isn't this over the top? They're just cars in a driveway. Karen's face flushed red, her gavel crashing down. Out of order, Sarah. You're not recognized. She barked, her composure fracturing. I let out a quiet laugh. Oh, she was cracking already. Her husband, Bob, started handing out a new bylaw proposal, 2 cars per household, garage-only parking, with $1,000 fines for breaking it. I skimmed it, my jaw tightening as I realized her plan. Bleed me dry, force me to hide my collection like some guilty secret. I thought of Jake, my son, driving to his job, and Emily, rushing to her hospital shifts. This was bigger than me. It was about every neighbor she'd trampled. But I wasn't here to beg. I was here to dominate. We'll vote on the new restrictions and fee increase, Karen announced, skipping debate, her gavel poised like a judge's gavel. That was my signal. I rose, slow and deliberate, my voice booming with authority. Point of order, Madam President, I said, calm but commanding. Karen's eyes narrowed, her grip on the gavel tightening as she glared over her glasses. You're not recognized, Mr. Harper, she spat. But I stood firm. Actually, I replied, pulling a folder from my briefcase, per HOA bylaw 7.3, Any property owner can raise a point of order on voting. The room went quiet, every gaze locked on me, their anticipation crackling in the air. I stepped forward, my shoes echoing on the linoleum, my confidence a shield around me. Before we vote, I continued, my voice steady and strong, let's review the HOA's property ownership. Karen's face drained of color as I unfolded a property map, slapping it down with a flourish. I met every board member's eyes, my gaze unyielding. Over 6 years, Harper Motors Realty has been buying homes here, I said, letting the words sink in. Gasps broke out, the crowd buzzing like a hive. And as CEO of Harper Motors Realty, I declared, my voice rising with triumph, I own 77% of this HOA. The room exploded, whispers turning to a roar. Karen's hand trembled as she grabbed her water bottle, her gavel clattering to the floor. Bob rushed to her, whispering frantically, but I pressed on. Maybe we should discuss your extracurricular activities, Karen, I said, my grin widening as I fired up my laptop. The screen flashed with security footage. Karen at 2 a.m., measuring my grass with a ruler, her flashlight jittering like a guilty conscience. The crowd gasped again, louder, and I leaned against the table, arms crossed, my confidence unshaken. Karen's reign was cracking, and I was just warming up. The room was a volcano about to erupt, the air thick with gasps and murmurs as Karen's gavel lay abandoned on the floor, her face a mask of shock and fury. I stood tall at the front, my briefcase open like a war chest, my heart pounding with a mix of vengeance and victory. That 2 a.m. footage of her measuring my grass looped on the screen, her flashlight jittering like a guilty shadow, and I could feel the neighborhood's outrage swelling behind me. This wasn't just about my car collection anymore. It was about every tear Mrs. Patel shed over her grandson's ramp, every dollar Mr. Henderson lost to her heartless fines, every sleepless night Emily and I endured under her tyranny. I was here to dominate, to make Karen pay for every injustice, and I relished every second of it. Karen's husband, Bob, whispered frantically in her ear, his face pale, but she shoved him aside, her eyes blazing as she snatched the gavel. This is preposterous, she shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. You can't just waltz in here with fake maps and doctored videos. I laughed, a deep, triumphant sound that echoed off the walls, stepping closer to the podium, my confidence a blazing torch. Fake. Doctored. I shot back, my voice dripping with scorn. Let's show them the rest, then. I clicked my laptop, and the screen filled with bank statements. $50,000 vanished from the HOA funds, funneled into Susan Carter's backyard deck, while our pool sat cracked and useless. The crowd gasped, a wave of anger rippling through them, and I felt a surge of pride. This was my moment. Mrs. Rodriguez shot to her feet, her voice trembling with years of pent-up rage. She fined me $200 last month for my grandson's bike. My grandson, Karen, she cried, pointing a shaky finger. Mr. Chin joined her, his face flushed. And me, for my garden. You called it too exotic, while ignoring Susan's purple mailbox. The room erupted, voices overlapping, a chorus of pain and defiance. I raised a hand, silencing them with a commanding gesture, my eyes locked on Karen. That's right, I said, my tone icy with resolve. She's been playing favorites, breaking her own rules, and bleeding us dry. But I'm not done. I pulled out a stack of signed complaints. 32 neighbors, their stories etched in ink. These are from people she's harassed, I declared, my voice booming with righteous fury. Mrs. Davis, fined for vibrant gnomes. Mr. Henderson, crushed for Christmas lights while he was in the hospital. Sarah Jenkins, double charged for being a single mom. I slammed the papers on the table, the thud reverberating like a judge's gavel. Karen's face twisted, her hands shaking as she gripped the podium. Lies. All lies, she sputtered, but her voice was a weak whimper against the growing storm. I wasn't finished. I opened another folder, my grin widening as I revealed emails from Karen's private Facebook group. Here's her bragging, I said, my voice laced with triumph. She wrote, thanks to my rule breakers for funding my vacations. Poolside pics from Maui, paid with our dues. The crowd roared, some standing, others shaking their heads in disbelief. I glanced at Emily in the back, her eyes shining with pride, and felt a fire ignite in my chest. This was for her, for Jake, for every neighbor Karen had wronged. My vengeance was a tidal wave, and she was drowning in it. Karen lunged forward, her composure shattering. "You think you can destroy me with this nonsense?" she screamed, her finger jabbing at me. "I've kept this neighborhood perfect." I stepped closer, towering over her, my voice a low growl of authority. "Perfect? You've turned it into a prison. But I own 77% of it, Karen. I'm the majority, and I'm dissolving your board tonight." Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes wide with panic. Bob tried to pull her back, but she shook him off, her designer heels clicking as she paced. "You'll regret this, Harper. I'll sue. I cut her off, my laugh sharp and cutting. "Sue? With what evidence?" "I've got the deeds, the footage, the receipts." "You're done." The room buzzed with energy, neighbors clapping, some cheering as the reality sank in. Mrs. Patel wiped a tear, mouthing thank you from across the room, and I nodded, my chest swelling with satisfaction. I turned to the board, my voice steady and commanding. "I move to dissolve this HOA board and call for new elections. Term limits, fair rules, no more midnight inspections." Hands shot up, Mr. Chin's, Sarah's, even quiet Mr. Davis's. "Seconded," Mr. Chin shouted, his voice strong. The vote was unanimous, a tidal wave of justice washing Karen away. Karen grabbed her purse, her face a mask of defeat, and stormed toward the door. "This meeting is adjourned," she yelled, her voice breaking. I stepped into her path, my grin unwavering. "Not so fast," I said, my tone cool and unyielding. "Bylaw 7.3 requires a majority vote to adjourn, and you don't have it anymore." She froze, her hand on the knob, her empire crumbling before her eyes. I opened another folder, my voice rising with finality. "Let's talk about those pool funds, Karen. $50,000 gone, and I've got the bank records to prove it." "Care to explain?" Her shoulders slumped, and I knew I'd won. The neighborhood was mine to rebuild, and Karen's reign was history. Karen stood frozen at the door, her hand trembling on the knob, her empire reduced to ash in a single night. I leaned against the table, my arms crossed, my confidence a blazing fire as the room pulsed with the energy of a neighborhood reborn. I'd just dropped the bomb about her $50,000 pool fund scam, and the bank records on the screen were undeniable. Every penny traced, every lie exposed. The crowd was on their feet, their voices a roaring wave of justice, and I felt a surge of triumph that burned hotter than ever. I'd fought for every neighbor she'd wronged. Mrs. Patel, Mr. Henderson, Sarah Jenkins, and now, Elmwood Lane was mine to rebuild. I wasn't just taking down a tyrant. I was giving my community its heart back. Karen's face crumpled, her designer purse slipping from her shoulder as she turned to me, her voice a broken whisper. You'll ruin everything I've built," she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. I stepped closer, my gaze unyielding, my voice a low rumble of finality. "You built a cage, Karen. I'm setting us free." The room erupted in cheers, neighbors clapping, some wiping tears of relief, and I felt my chest swell with pride. I turned to the crowd, my voice booming with authority. "We've dissolved the old board. It's time for a new one, elected by us, for us." Hands shot up, eager voices nominating Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Chun, even quiet Mrs. Davis. I nodded, my heart soaring as I saw hope ignite in their eyes. This was what I'd fought for. Over the next week, we transformed Elmwood Lane. The new board, 5 residents from all corners of the neighborhood, set fair rules. Kids could play basketball in driveways, gardens could grow vegetables, and yes, families could park their cars without fear. I walked outside one morning, my heart lifting as I saw Jake's car parked proudly beside mine. No fines, no notices, just freedom. Mrs. Patel's grandson zoomed by on his skateboard ramp, laughing, while Mr. Chun tended his garden, his smile brighter than ever. Emily wrapped her arms around me, her voice soft with awe. "You did it, Mike. You really did it." I kissed her forehead, my throat tightening with emotion. "We did it, Em. All of us." 3 weeks later, I watched from my window as Karen's moving truck rolled in. She'd sent a bitter letter to everyone, claiming she was upgrading to a better neighborhood with higher standards, but I caught the irony. A parking ticket stuck to her windshield as she drove off. I chuckled, a weight lifting off my shoulders. That evening, I put up a sign we'd all voted on. "Welcome to Harper Hills, where good neighbors thrive." The next day, my phone rang. A TV producer had seen the news coverage of our HOA takeover and wanted to film a documentary. As I looked out at kids playing freely, neighbors chatting over fences, and property values soaring 15% in a month, I felt a lump in my throat. This wasn't just a victory over Karen. It was a tribute to my dad, who'd lost his first home to an HOA's cruelty 20 years ago. I'd kept his lessons alive. Fight smart, fight for what's right, and never let a bully win. I sat on my porch that night, the sunset painting the sky in fiery hues, my car collection gleaming in the driveway, a symbol of everything I'd earned, everything I'd protected. Tears stung my eyes as I thought of every neighbor who'd stood with me. Every story of pain turned into hope. Elmwood Lane, no, Harper Hills, wasn't just a place anymore, it was a family. And I'd made sure no one would ever feel the fear we'd lived under again. I leaned back, a smile breaking through my tears, knowing Karen was probably watching that documentary from her new one-car garage, her power a distant memory. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about tearing someone down. It's about building something better, something that lasts. What did you think of my showdown with Karen? Drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare like this? And if you loved seeing justice served, hit that subscribe button for more stories of taking down the Karens of the world. Let's keep building this community together, stronger every day. I discovered the Oak Ridge HOA was building 92 luxury homes on my inherited farmland, but when I unearthed my grandfather's original property surveys, their entire development flipped upside down and became my legal property. Can you imagine the stunned looks on their faces when I sprang my trap at their own community meeting? I never dreamed I'd have to fight for land that was already mine. Before we get into the details, let me know in the comments where you are watching this video from. When Grandpa George passed last June, he left me his 240-acre farm outside Pine Hollow, Tennessee, a place that had been in our family since 1885. I was stuck in Atlanta, buried in a tech job that ate up my days, too busy to visit the old homestead as often as I wanted. Then, at 6:12 a.m. on a soggy Wednesday in May 2024, my phone jolted me awake. It was Mrs. Ellen Parker, Grandpa's neighbor for over 50 years. "James, they're bulldozing your land." Her voice shook with fury. "Big machines rolled in yesterday, ripping up the north fields. They've got signs, 92 luxury homes. Get here fast." Now, if you're watching this and thinking, how does that even happen? Believe me, I was asking the same thing. Drop a comment below if you've ever had someone try to snatch something that's rightfully yours, because I'd love to know I'm not alone in this mess. That farm wasn't just some plot of dirt. It was where Grandpa taught me to drive his beat-up tractor, where we'd watch fireflies light up the summer nights. Losing it wasn't an option. I grabbed a backpack, threw in some clothes, and sped out of Atlanta, pushing 85 miles per hour toward Pine Hollow, my mind a whirlwind. Grandpa would have fought this with everything he had. He'd never sell. 6 hours later, I hit the gravel road to the farmhouse, the familiar crunch drowned by a mechanical roar. As I crested the ridge over the northern acres, my stomach sank. Bulldozers and excavators tore into the soil where Grandpa grew sorghum and alfalfa, dust swirling like a storm. Workers in hard hats swarmed, staking the ground with neon markers, while a sign blared. Future site of Oak Ridge Estates. 92 luxury homes starting at $510,000. I parked, legs wobbly, and zeroed in on a woman standing apart, her auburn hair tight in a bun, clipboard in hand as she snapped orders into her phone. "Excuse me," I said, voice sharp, as she hung up. She turned, eyeing me like I was a nuisance. "Yes? I'm Karen Mitchell, president of Oak Ridge HOA. What's your business here?" I squared up. "This is my land. My grandfather, George Carter, owned this farm. He died last year, and it's mine. What are you doing?" Her smile was cold, rehearsed. "A misunderstanding, I'm sure. Oak Ridge bought this parcel 10 months ago, $1.4 million. All permits are in order." She offered a handshake I didn't take. "Bought?" I snapped. "Grandpa would have died before selling. He loved this place." Karen tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "Perhaps he didn't tell you. The deal closed last August. Call our legal team." She handed me a slick business card and turned back to her phone, dismissing me. I stood there, the rumble of machines shaking the ground, watching them shred my family's legacy. Something was off. Grandpa's mind was razor sharp, even at the end. He'd have warned me. I glanced at Karen, strutting to her SUV, and crushed the card in my fist. She thought I'd back down. She didn't know me, or Grandpa. At the farmhouse, Mrs. Parker waited on the porch, wringing a dish towel. They started sniffing around 4 months ago, she said, voice thick. George called them thieves in suits, said they'd regret it. Ever mentioned selling? I shook my head. Never. He swore this farm was ours forever. Her eyes softened. The night before hospice, he was in his office, digging through papers. Said he had to keep it safe. That lit a spark in me. I stepped inside, the scent of old wood and leather hitting me hard. Grandpa's office was frozen in time. Dusty ledgers, faded maps, a jar of field-found pennies. If there was proof, it was here. I rifled through drawers. Nothing but crop logs and tax stubs. Night fell, my eyes stinging under a dim lamp, until my foot nudged a loose floorboard. My pulse spiked. I pried it open with a pocket knife, revealing a rusted tin box, a key taped beneath. Inside, the deed, his will, and a letter in his scrawl. James, if you've got this, they're after our land. Fight them. The truth's in the lines. My hands trembled as I clutched Grandpa's letter, the words searing into me like a brand. Fight them. The truth's in the lines. The dim glow of the lamp cast shadows across the farmhouse kitchen, where I'd spread out the contents of that rusted tin box like a treasure map to a war I didn't sign up for. The deed glared back at me, bold and unyielding, claiming 310 acres, not the 240 I'd been told. Then there were the surveys, yellowed, creased, one from 1905, another updated in 1982, showing boundaries that stretched way beyond what I'd ever imagined. My heart pounded as I traced the lines with my finger. Oak Ridge wasn't just building on my land. They'd already planted their fancy clubhouse and 18 existing homes on it too. This wasn't a mistake. It was a heist, and Grandpa had seen it coming from a mile away. Sleep? Forget it. I was wired, pacing the creaky floorboards, adrenaline pumping like I'd downed a gallon of coffee. Those liars at Oak Ridge thought they could bulldoze my family's history and slap a price tag on it. $510? 000 homes on my dirt? No chance. I could still hear Karen Mitchell's smug voice. Maybe he didn't tell you. Oh, she was about to find out how wrong she was. At sunrise, I was outside the office of Robert Hayes, Pine Hollow's only property lawyer, banging on the door before his receptionist even flipped the open sign. Emergency, I barked when she peeked out, bleary-eyed. She ushered me in, and 10 minutes later, I was slamming those surveys onto Robert's desk, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and hope. They're building on my land, Grandpa's land. Look at these. Robert, a wiry guy with gray hair and a BLO tie straight out of a Western, squinted through his bifocals, his fingers tracing the faded ink. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered, eyebrows shooting up. This says your property runs half a mile further north than the county records show. That's not just the construction site, that's their clubhouse, those homes, the works. I leaned in, barely breathing. So it's mine. He nodded, slow and serious. If these hold up, yeah. But this kind of boundary mess? It's a legal hornet's nest. We need to know how it got shrunk. He grabbed his phone, dialed the county assessor's office, and put it on speaker. My pulse raced as we waded through a maze of transfers. Then, boom, a bombshell. In 1986, a tiny 15-foot easement tweak was logged. But in 1999, a massive 70-acre chunk vanished, with a signature that looked like Grandpa's, if he'd been drunk and writing with his left hand. He was in the ICU that month, I said, my voice tight. Triple bypass. No way he signed that. Robert's face darkened. That's fraud, James. Proving it after 25 years won't be a cakewalk, but we've got a shot. He scribbled notes like a man possessed. Here's the plan. We file an emergency injunction to stop construction today. Then we petition the court to restore the original boundaries. I'll call a surveyor to verify these maps, stat. I nodded, my chest buzzing with a wild mix of dread and defiance. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was Grandpa's fight, and I was his soldier. But I needed more firepower. I tore out of there and hit the county records office, a stuffy brick building that smelled like mildew and bureaucracy. Hours later, buried in a corner with stacks of dusty files, I struck gold. Oak Ridge wasn't just an HOA, it was a spiderweb of LLCs and shell companies. Names popped up like red flags: Karen Mitchell, her husband, David Mitchell, County Commissioner Tom Bradley, Planning Director Lisa Evans, tied to a $14 million loan for Oak Ridge Estates, collateralized with my land. I snapped photos with my phone, my hands shaking with fury. They weren't just stealing, they were banking on it. I couldn't stop there. I raced to the Pine Hollow Tribune, where editor Megan Brooks, Grandpa's old fishing buddy, leaned over her desk, as narrowing as I spilled the story. Fraud by bigwigs? That's juicy, she said, tapping her pen. No proof, no print, but I'll dig into how this project got fast-tracked. It stinks of backroom deals. I thanked her and headed back to the farm, my head spinning. Mrs. Ellen Parker was on the porch with another neighbor, old Mr. Hank Sullivan, who scowled when I mentioned Karen. That woman's why I sold my place, he growled, his voice rough as gravel. Find me $300 a week for my vegetable patch. 20 years I grew those peppers. Said my shed broke some rule they invented. Drove me out. I leaned in, pulse racing. How many others? He scratched his chin. 10, maybe 12 folks in 5 years, always below market. Always to Oak Ridge cronies. A pattern. A predator. And Grandpa had been their next prey, only he'd laid a trap they never saw coming. My phone buzzed. Robert. Injunctions filed. Judge signed it. Construction halts at noon tomorrow. But watch your back. This'll get nasty. I grinned, a feral edge to it, and drove to the site, court order in hand. The workers were packing up, but Karen's silver SUV gleamed nearby. She strode out, phone glued to her ear, her face hardening when she saw me. Construction stops now, I said, thrusting the paper at her, my voice crackling with pent-up rage. Boundaries are disputed. She snatched it, her perfect mask slipping, just for a second. This is absurd, she hissed. We've got approvals. Based on forged lines, I shot back. I've got the originals. Her eyes flickered with something fear, before icing over. You'll regret this, she said, low and venomous. You don't know who you're up against. I stepped closer, voice steady. Oh, I do. 6 names, $14 million in loans, my land is collateral. How's that feel, Karen? She froze, her grip on her phone whitening her knuckles. You're delusional, she spat, but her bravado wobbled. We'll offer you cash, 7 figures. Take it and go back to your city life. I laughed, sharp and bitter. This land's been ours for 5 generations. It's not for sale. I turned away, her glare burning holes in my back as she shouted, Tom Bradley's my husband's golf buddy. Judge Harper eats at my table. You're nothing here. Her words echoed as I drove off, but they didn't scare me. They fueled me. She thought she held all the cards, but Grandpa had dealt me an ace, and I was just getting started. My hands trembled as I clutched Grandpa's letter, the words searing into me like a brand. Fight them. The truth's in the lines. The dim glow of the lamp cast shadows across the farmhouse kitchen, where I'd spread out the contents of that rusted tin box like a treasure map to a war I didn't sign up for. The deed glared back at me, bold and unyielding, claiming 310 acres, not the 240 I'd been told. Then there were the surveys, yellowed, creased, one from 1905, another updated in 1982, showing boundaries that stretched way beyond what I'd ever imagined. My heart pounded as I traced the lines with my finger. Oak Ridge wasn't just building on my land. They'd already planted their fancy clubhouse and 18 existing homes on it too. This wasn't a mistake. It was a heist, and Grandpa had seen it coming from a mile away. Sleep? Forget it. I was wired, pacing the creaky floorboards, adrenaline pumping like I'd downed a gallon of coffee. Those liars at Oak Ridge thought they could bulldoze my family's history and slap a price tag on it. $510? 000 homes on my dirt? No chance. I could still hear Karen Mitchell's smug voice. Maybe he didn't tell you. Oh, she was about to find out how wrong she was. At sunrise, I was outside the office of Robert Hayes, Pine Hollow's only property lawyer, banging on the door before his receptionist even flipped the open sign. Emergency, I barked when she peeked out, bleary-eyed. She ushered me in, and 10 minutes later, I was slamming those surveys onto Robert's desk, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and hope. They're building on my land, Grandpa's land. Look at these. Robert, a wiry guy with gray hair and a BLO tie straight out of a Western, squinted through his bifocals, his fingers tracing the faded ink. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered, eyebrows shooting up. This says your property runs half a mile further north than the county records show. That's not just the construction site, that's their clubhouse, those homes, the works. I leaned in, barely breathing. So it's mine. He nodded, slow and serious. If these hold up, yeah. But this kind of boundary mess? It's a legal hornet's nest. We need to know how it got shrunk. He grabbed his phone, dialed the county assessor's office, and put it on speaker. My pulse raced as we waded through a maze of transfers. Then, boom, a bombshell. In 1986, a tiny 15-foot easement tweak was logged. But in 1999, a massive 70-acre chunk vanished, with a signature that looked like Grandpa's, if he'd been drunk and writing with his left hand. He was in the ICU that month, I said, my voice tight. Triple bypass. No way he signed that. Robert's face darkened. That's fraud, James. Proving it after 25 years won't be a cakewalk, but we've got a shot. He scribbled notes like a man possessed. Here's the plan. We file an emergency injunction to stop construction today. Then we petition the court to restore the original boundaries. I'll call a surveyor to verify these maps, stat. I nodded, my chest buzzing with a wild mix of dread and defiance. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was Grandpa's fight, and I was his soldier. But I needed more firepower. I tore out of there and hit the county records office, a stuffy brick building that smelled like mildew and bureaucracy. Hours later, buried in a corner with stacks of dusty files, I struck gold. Oak Ridge wasn't just an HOA, it was a spiderweb of LLCs and shell companies. Names popped up like red flags: Karen Mitchell, her husband, David Mitchell, County Commissioner Tom Bradley, Planning Director Lisa Evans, tied to a $14 million loan for Oak Ridge Estates, collateralized with my land. I snapped photos with my phone, my hands shaking with fury. They weren't just stealing, they were banking on it. I couldn't stop there. I raced to the Pine Hollow Tribune, where editor Megan Brooks, Grandpa's old fishing buddy, leaned over her desk, eyes narrowing as I spilled the story. Fraud by bigwigs? That's juicy, she said, tapping her pen. No proof, no print, but I'll dig into how this project got fast-tracked. It stinks of backroom deals. I thanked her and headed back to the farm, my head spinning. Mrs. Ellen Parker was on the porch with another neighbor, old Mr. Hank Sullivan, who scowled when I mentioned Karen. That woman's why I sold my place, he growled, his voice rough as gravel. Find me $300 a week for my vegetable patch. 20 years I grew those peppers. Said my shed broke some rule they invented. Drove me out. I leaned in, pulse racing. How many others? He scratched his chin. 10, maybe 12 folks in 5 years, always below market. Always to Oak Ridge cronies. A pattern. A predator. And Grandpa had been their next prey, only he'd laid a trap they never saw coming. My phone buzzed. Robert. Injunctions filed. Judge signed it. Construction halts at noon tomorrow. But watch your back. This'll get nasty. I grinned, a feral edge to it, and drove to the site, court order in hand. The workers were packing up, but Karen's silver SUV gleamed nearby. She strode out, phone glued to her ear, her face hardening when she saw me. Construction stops now, I said, thrusting the paper at her, my voice crackling with pent-up rage. Boundaries are disputed. She snatched it, her perfect mask slipping, just for a second. This is absurd, she hissed. We've got approvals. Based on forged lines, I shot back. I've got the originals. Her eyes flickered with something fear, before icing over. You'll regret this, she said, low and venomous. You don't know who you're up against. I stepped closer, voice steady. Oh, I do. 6 names, $14 million in loans, my land is collateral. How's that feel, Karen? She froze, her grip on her phone whitening her knuckles. You're delusional, she spat, but her bravado wobbled. We'll offer you cash, 7 figures. Take it and go back to your city life. I laughed, sharp and bitter. This land's been ours for 5 generations. It's not for sale. I turned away, her glare burning holes in my back as she shouted, Tom Bradley's my husband's golf buddy. Judge Harper eats at my table. You're nothing here. Her words echoed as I drove off, but they didn't scare me. They fueled me. She thought she held all the cards, but Grandpa had dealt me an ace, and I was just getting started. Karen's threat rang in my ears like a bad song on repeat as I peeled away from the construction site, gravel spitting under my tires. You're nothing here. She'd sneered, but she didn't get it. Grandpa George wasn't nothing, and neither was I. The court order in my passenger seat felt like a loaded gun, but I knew it was just the first shot in a battle that was about to explode. Back at the farmhouse, I barely had time to catch my breath before my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking violation at your property, $600 fine, Oak Ridge HOA compliance. Attached was a photo of my truck, parked on my own damn land. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. This was their game, harassment by paperwork, just like Mr. Hank Sullivan had said. But I wasn't some old-timer they could bully into submission. I had Grandpa's ace up my sleeve, and I was ready to play it. Night swallowed the farm, the silence eerie with the bulldozers finally still. I sat on the porch, the same spot where Grandpa used to spin tales of fishing trips and stubborn mules, staring at the dark fields. The air smelled of damp earth and betrayal. Karen thought she could scare me off with her country club connections? She'd underestimated the fire she'd lit. I dove back into Grandpa's office, tearing through every drawer, every notebook, fueled by a restless fury. In a photo album labeled Pine Hollow Fair 2017, I hit pay dirt. Snapshots of Grandpa with townsfolk, names scribbled on the backs, farmers, shop owners, families who'd known him forever. These weren't just pictures, they were a network, a lifeline. If Karen wanted a war, I'd build an army. Morning broke with a vengeance. My phone rang, Karen's name flashing like a warning siren. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Good morning, James," she purred, her voice syrupy enough to choke on. "Enjoying the quiet?" I snorted. "You mean the quiet you're trying to ruin?" "Blocking my driveway's harassment, Karen." She laughed, sharp and cold. "Oh, sweetie, according to county records, the real ones, that driveway's on Oak Ridge common land. We control access. And by tonight, expect 12 code violations on that dump you call a farmhouse. Water's next, maintenance issues, you know. Contractors won't touch your calls either. Small-town life's a web, and I'm the spider." My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice steady. "That's illegal. That's politics," she shot back. "Drop your claims, sign over the land, and I'll toss in a fat check. Last chance." I gripped the phone, knuckles white. "This isn't about money, it's about what's mine. See you in court." I hung up, her laugh echoing in my head, but I wasn't shaking, I was seething. She wasn't bluffing. By noon, a county inspector showed up, a nervous guy in a polo shirt who handed me a list of violations longer than my arm: faulty wiring, shaky porch steps, septic nonsense, $8,000 to fix yesterday. Then the water slowed to a dribble. I called the utility company, got a robotic, scheduled maintenance excuse, and slammed the phone down. Tried ordering lunch. Pizza guy couldn't find the address that had been on their map for decades. I was trapped, cut off, a prisoner on my own land. But every petty move she made just stoked the fire higher. I grabbed my keys and stormed out, dodging the concrete blocks she'd had dumped across my driveway overnight. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I'd hit back harder. First stop, Mrs. Ellen Parker. She flung open her door, floral apron flapping, eyes wide. "They shut off your water? That's low, even for her." I nodded, my voice tight. "She's got the county in her pocket. But I need names. Who else hates Oak Ridge as much as we do?" She grinned, a spark in her weathered face. "Oh, honey, sit down. This'll take a minute." Over iced tea that tasted like summer, she rattled off a list. The Wilsons, fined $700 for a non-approved mailbox. Old Mrs. Clara Hayes, hassled over grandkids visiting too often. Single mom Jenny Ortiz, slapped with a $1,000 fee for a fence to keep her toddlers safe. "They're scared," Ellen said, "but they're mad too." I spent the day pounding pavement, knocking on doors across Oak Ridge's beige empire. At first, folks hesitated, peeking through blinds like I was trouble. But when I flashed Grandpa's surveys, proving their precious homes might be on my land, something shifted, fear turned to fire. Take Sarah Miller. She invited me in, hands trembling as she poured lemonade. Karen made my husband rip out our zucchini patch, said veggies weren't aesthetic. $600 fine on top, and he's already working double shifts. Her eyes blazed. "I'm in, whatever you're planning." Then the Thompsons, $2, $500 fighting over a porch swing. "It's not the rules," Mike Thompson growled. "It's the randomness. She picks who to punish." By dusk, I'd rallied 24 families, their stories a chorus of outrage. My phone buzzed. "Robert, they've countersued, claiming your docs are fake. Court's in 10 weeks, they'll build till then." I smirked. "Not if I stop him first." I scrolled my contacts, landing on Jessica Lane, a high school pal turned reporter at the Tribune. "Jess, I've got a scoop. HOA fraud. Big names. You in?" Her voice crackled with excitement. "Hell yes. Meet me tomorrow." As I hung up, headlights sliced through the dusk. I tensed. Another Oak Ridge goon? But the car weaved past the barriers, and out stepped Brian Foster, Oak Ridge's treasurer, glancing over his shoulder like a hunted man. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered, shoving a USB drive into my hand. "Karen bury me if she finds out." My pulse spiked. Why risk it? He met my eyes, jaw tight. "Because she's crooked. I've got 7 years of their books, stuff you need to see." I ushered him inside, my heart racing. At the kitchen table, he fired up his laptop, and there it was, proof that'd make Grandpa proud. $380,000 in HOA dues funneled to Pine Consulting LLC, owned by Karen's brother-in-law. Theft, I whispered. Brian nodded. And the 18 homes on your land? Residents have begged for flood fixes for years. She knew they weren't hers to fix. My phone pinged, text from strangers. We're with you. Karen, find us $500 for a birdhouse. Brian grinned faintly. I might have spread your number. For the first time, I felt it. Hope, sharp and electric. Karen's web was unraveling, and I was about to pull the thread. The USB drive burned a hole in my pocket as I watched Brian Foster's taillights vanish into the rainy night, his nervous glances over his shoulder haunting me. Inside, the farmhouse kitchen glowed under the flicker of a single bulb, and I plugged that drive into my laptop with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. What spilled across the screen was a gut punch. 7 years of Oak Ridge HOA's dirty laundry, $380,000 siphoned to Karen's brother-in-law's fake consulting gig, $150,000 in emergency fees. For road work that never happened, contracts handed to her cousin's landscaping crew at triple the going rate. My blood boiled as I scrolled. This wasn't just about my land anymore. Karen had turned Oak Ridge into her personal piggy bank, and the whole town was paying for it. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. Fight them, James. Oh, I was fighting now, and I wasn't alone. Morning hit like a freight train. No water, no power. Karen's promised punishment had landed hard. I stood in the kitchen, staring at a fridge full of spoiled milk, my breath fogging in the chilly air. She thought she could freeze me out, make me crawl back to Atlanta with my tail between my legs. Fat chance. Every petty jab she threw just sharpened my edge. I grabbed my notebook and stormed out, dodging those damn concrete blocks again, my boots kicking up mud as I headed for Mrs. Ellen Parker's place. She flung open her door, eyes blazing. No electricity too? That woman's a snake. I nodded, my voice raw. She's got the county on a leash, but I've got proof she's robbing everyone blind. Who else is fed up? Ellen's grin was wicked. Grab a seat, hon. I've got a list. Over coffee that tasted like defiance, she spilled names faster than I could write. The Jacksons, fined $800 for a non-compliant shed. Mr. Ed Riley, harassed over a flagpole. The Lopez family, hit with $1,200 for a kid's trampoline. They're terrified, Ellen said, but show 'em what you've got, and they'll fight. I spent the day pounding doors, my knuckles raw by noon. At first, folks were cagey. Years under Karen's thumb had them spooked. But when I flashed Brian's financials and Grandpa's surveys, their eyes lit up with something fierce. Take Lisa Carter. She nearly broke a glass slamming it down. Karen fined us $700 for planting roses, said they clashed with the approved palette. My wife cried for days. Her husband, Mark, nodded, fist clenched. We're in, let's bury her. By sunset, I'd rallied 31 families, their anger a wildfire spreading through Oak Ridge's cookie-cutter streets. The Thompsons vented about $2,500 wasted on a porch swing battle. Jenny Ortiz choked up over her toddler's fence fine. It's not fair, she whispered, and I felt that ache in my chest. Grandpa would have hated this. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts from strangers piling up. Karen took our kid's swing set, $400 fine. She banned my dog's bark collar, $600. I called Robert Hayes, my lawyer, voice buzzing with adrenaline. Can we start our own HOA on my land? He chuckled, low and sharp. Damn right you can. And those existing homes? That's where it gets fun. I'll draft papers. I grinned. Good. Book the community center for tomorrow night. It's mine, right? He laughed outright. By those surveys? Yep. They can't stop you. I printed 250 flyers that night. Emergency meeting. Your home's at risk. Slapping copies of Grandpa's surveys on each one. By dusk, the Oak Ridge Community Center was a powder keg. 108 families crammed in. Chairs gone. People leaning against walls, whispering like a storm was brewing. Karen burst through the doors last, her face a mask of fury in a crimson blazer. This is illegal, she barked, shoving past folks. Everyone out, now. Lisa Carter shot up, her voice cutting through the din. Or what? More fines? You've bled us dry. The room roared with applause, and I felt the tide turn. I stepped to the front, hands up, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't come to stir trouble, I shouted over the noise. I came because Oak Ridge stole my grandfather's land. But after hearing you all, I see I'm not the only one they've screwed. For an hour, the mic passed hand to hand, tears, Shouts, raw fury pouring out. Mr. Riley's voice cracked as he told of losing his flagpole to aesthetic rules. Jenny Ortiz held up her fine, trembling. Karen sat in the back, typing furiously on her phone, her cool cracking with every story. Here's the plan, I said when the room finally hushed, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. We formed the Pine Hollow Community Alliance. Fair lines, fair rules. No more of this HOA tyranny. No one loses their home. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to fix. Karen leapt up, her voice shrill. You can't. These homes are locked into Oak Ridge by contract. I held up the survey, my grin feral. Contracts on stolen land don't hold water, Karen. Checkmate. The vote was a landslide. 97 families signed on, their cheers shaking the walls. As folks filed out, buzzing with hope, Brian Foster sidled up, eyes darting to Karen across the room. The books, he whispered. They're worse than I said. Dues tripled in 2 years, reserves are gone, $500, 000 unaccounted for. She locks me out of the accounts, but I've got backups. I clapped his shoulder, adrenaline surging. Bring him tomorrow. Karen stormed over, her finger jabbing my chest. Big mistake, James. By noon, you'll wish you'd never set foot here. I've got the commissioner, the sheriff, the judge. They'll crush this little uprising. Her breath was hot, her eyes wild, but I didn't flinch. Threats don't scare me, I said, low and hard. Truth does. Sleep tight. She slammed the door so hard the glass rattled, but I barely noticed. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Environmental reports in. You're gonna love this. I smirked into the dark. Karen thought she was untouchable, but Grandpa always said the best traps catch the prey when they're too busy gloating to see the noose. She just tightened hers. Karen's venomous words, you'll wish you'd never set foot here, clawed at me as I sped back to the farmhouse, rain lashing the windshield like a drum roll for the showdown I'd been building toward. She thought she could crush me with her cronies, but the Pine Hollow Community Alliance was a tidal wave she couldn't outrun. My phone buzzed with Robert's text. Environmental reports in. You're gonna love this. I smirked, a fierce, untamed grin splitting my face as I swerved past her stupid concrete blocks. No power, no water, just me, Grandpa George's ghost, and a stack of evidence ready to bury her for good. This wasn't just a fight, it was vengeance, and I could taste it. I didn't sleep, sprawled across the kitchen table with Grandpa's surveys and Brian's USB glowing on my laptop like a war chest. Dawn broke ugly and raw, and I was gulping yesterday's stale coffee when engines growled outside. I bolted to the porch, fist clenched, 3 sheriff's SUVs, lights slicing the gloom, and there she was, Karen, smug as a queen beside Sheriff Dan Carter. You're done, he barked as I stepped out, my pulse a war drum. Trespassing on Oak Ridge land. I laughed, loud and wild, shoving a folder at him. Deed, surveys, the works. Check again, Sheriff, I own this place. Karen's scoff was shrill. Those are forged trash. But then Laura Evans from the county records office stepped up, her voice cutting like steel. Wrong. We verified the originals last night, troubling tips led us here. Karen's face crumpled, color draining as her empire teetered. Inside, I snapped, my voice a growl. Coffee's cold, but the reckoning's hot. The kitchen turned into a cage match. Sheriff Carter, Laura, Robert Hayes, and Karen, her perfect blazer no shield against the storm. Laura slapped maps down, her finger stabbing the lines. The 1905 survey was buried in 87 on purpose. This land, including Oak Ridge's clubhouse and 18 homes, is James Carter's. Sheriff Carter's whistle was low, stunned. That's a mess. Not a mess, fraud, Robert said, icy and sharp. Forged signatures from 99, George was in the ICU, dying. He didn't sign squat. Karen slammed the table, her voice a banshee wail. This is a con. You're robbing honest people. I shoved Brian's financials at the sheriff, my blood singing. Honest? Try $380,000 to your brother-in-law's sham LLC. $150,000 vanished from repairs. Your family's a leech on this town. Sheriff Carter's eyes darkened as he scanned the pages. Pine Consulting, legit? Karen? She stiffened, her lie brittle. Our management firm. Owned by your sister's husband, I snarled, leaning in. Every contract's a Mitchell family paycheck. $500, 000 gone while residents bleed. He snapped the folder shut. Ms. Mitchell, you're coming with me. Her scream ricocheted off the walls. You can't. Judge Ramsey's my husband's golf buddy. I built this place. He hauled her out, her heels dragging, her reign collapsing in real time. She shot me a look pure, molten defeat, and I knew she'd never forget this. Laura turned, soft but firm. The residents? I exhaled, fierce and sure. No one's homeless. I'm ending this right. By noon, the site was a graveyard, bulldozers silent, news vans swarming. My phone blew up with calls, but I had one move left. That night, Pine Hollow High's auditorium was a furnace for 150 people, standing room only, buzzing with fear and fury. I grabbed the mic, voice rough but unbreakable. I'm James Carter. This was my grandfather's land. I didn't come to destroy, I came to avenge a wrong. The crowd roared. What about us? She stole my savings. I raised my hands, heart slamming. Here's the deal. Every homeowner gets a legal deed, no evictions. The new project's dead, wetlands stay, thanks to Grandpa's fight. I clicked to the environmental report, my chest swelling. 3 endangered species live there, federal law shuts her down. She knew and built anyway. A man shouted, my $80,000 lot's toast. I nodded, firm. Swaps equal value. New plan. You're whole. Relief rippled. Then Lisa Carter grabbed the mic, voice blazing. Karen banned my roses, find us broke, 8 years of her tyranny. We're done. The room erupted, cheers, tears, a wave of yes. In an hour, 380 signatures sealed the Pine Hollow Alliance. Brian Foster lingered, eyes bright. Bank records, she's cooked. Jessica Lane slid up, recorder hot. Front page tomorrow, HOA scam unravels. You're a hero, James. I grinned, bone-tired, but alive. Karen's lawyers fought, but the evidence crushed her. She took a plea, her name mud forever. She'd remember me as the guy who turned her kingdom to ash. A year later, I'm on Grandpa's porch, lemonade in hand, watching kids bike past houses with wild-colored doors, red, blue, green. The community garden's alive with Sarah Miller's tomatoes, neighbors laughing over shared clippers. The farmhouse? Now our Alliance hub, classes, cookouts, life pulsing through it. Wetlands gleam beyond, trails winding past signs about rare frogs and herons, safe under a federal easement. Mrs. Ellen Parker plops beside me, grinning. George, be proud, you're him reborn. I pull out his old journal, 30 years back. He'd battled developers too, saving those marshes. Stubborn runs in the family, I say, chest tight with pride. Karen tried to steal my land, break my spirit, but she handed me a legacy instead. Pine Hollow calls me their hero, me, the city kid who wouldn't quit. If you've stuck with me this far, drop a comment. What's your fight? Or hit subscribe. I've got more stories where this came from. Grandpa's trap didn't just catch her, it built something better, and I'll never let it go. What kind of psycho rolls up to your house with a bulldozer just to crush your dreams over a few tomato plants? That's the nightmare I woke up to last spring, and it's a wild ride you won't believe until you hear it all. Smash that like button if you want to be a winner in life, because trust me, I'm about to show you how to take down a tyrant without breaking a sweat. It all exploded on a crisp April morning in Cedar Ridge, a sleepy little suburb outside Charlotte, North Carolina, where I thought I'd finally found some peace. I was elbow-deep in rich, black dirt, planting my prized Brandywine tomato seedlings along my driveway. After 20 years of soul-crushing hours as a lawyer in Charlotte skyscrapers, I'd swapped my tie for a trowel, and let me tell you, nothing beats the rush of coaxing life from the earth. The sun warmed my back, birds chirped overhead, and I was in my happy place, until she showed up, stomping all over my zen like a hurricane in heels. Michael, what the hell do you think you're doing? I snapped my head up, and there she was, Karen Peterson, Queen Bee of the Oakwood Heights HOA, glaring down at me like I'd just keyed her Lexus. Her blonde bob didn't budge in the breeze, her arms were locked across her chest, and that smug little smirk told me she'd been itching for this fight. Morning, Karen. I shot back, plastering on a grin as I wiped sweaty, dirt-caked hands on my ripped jeans. Just giving my tomatoes some love. Ever tried a fresh Brandywine? I'll save you one, if you don't bulldoze them first. I winked, but her face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon. Don't get cute with me, she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. Front yards in Oakwood Heights are for pristine grass and HOA-approved azaleas, not your filthy little veggie patch. Move it to the back, or I'll make you wish you'd never picked up a shovel. She whipped out her phone, snapping pics like a paparazzi on a mission. I stood up fast, my pulse kicking into overdrive. Karen, my deed's older than your HOA by decades. My granddad built this place in '65, and I've got exemptions carved in stone. Want to see the papers, or should I just frame them for you? She didn't even blink, her fingers flying over her screen. Cry me a river, Michael. I'm reporting this eyesore to the board. Expect a violation notice by sundown. Rip that junk out, or the fines will bury you. She spun on her heel and strutted off, leaving me fuming. Across the street, Mr. Jenkins froze mid-dog walk, his mutt tugging at the leash while he mouthed, "Good luck, man." He'd been stung $150 last month for a non-compliant porch light. Sure enough, that night, a glaring orange notice was slapped on my door, $100 daily fine until unapproved agricultural activity ceases. Hearings next Tuesday. I ripped it off, shoving it into a folder I dubbed Karen's Reign of Terror. This wasn't just petty. It felt personal, like she'd declared war on my soul. My phone lit up with a call from Miss Evelyn Carter, the 80-year-old firecracker 3 houses down. "Michael, sugar," she rasped, her southern drawl thick as molasses. "I saw Karen tearing into you today. She's gone rogue. Last week, she hit the Lopez family with a $300 fine over their kid's skateboard ramp, called it a safety hazard. She's out for blood. She can't just do that." I growled, pacing my kitchen. "There's got to be a line." "There is," Evelyn said, her voice dropping low. "But she's got that slimy lawyer buddy, Ryan Brooks, greasing the wheels. They think they're gods around here. Watch your back. She plays dirty." I hung up, my mind racing. Gods. Not on my watch. The next morning, I stormed up to my attic, tearing through boxes like a man possessed. Old photos, my law school diploma, a baseball mitt. Hunting for the land docs my dad swore were gold. I was mid-rifle when a deep, guttural rumble shook the house. I bolted to the window, and my heart stopped. 3 hulking bulldozers squatted across my driveway, their engines snarling, my truck trapped behind them. Karen stood front and center in a power-red blazer, grinning like a shark, flanked by a wiry guy in a suit. Ryan Brooks, no doubt. Neighbors peeked out, jaws dropped, phones already recording. I charged outside, phone in hand, adrenaline surging. "Michael Davis." Karen bellowed, her voice echoing off the oaks. "Emergency board meeting last night. Your garden's a neighborhood disgrace. We're tearing it down now." Ryan adjusted his tie, stepping up with a smirk. "Ryan Brooks, HOA counsel. Section 6.9, immediate nuisance removal. Your little hobby's toast." The bulldozers lurched forward, tires crunching gravel. Little Timmy Lopez pedaled up on his bike, wide-eyed, while Mrs. Garcia clutched her rosary on her porch. I planted my feet, voice booming. "Ryan, you're about to trip over your own ego. Those beds aren't fixed structures, they're mobile. And you're trespassing on my land. Big mistake." Karen's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Bluff all you want, Michael. Cough up the $300 you owe already. Ditch the plants, and we'll spare you the embarrassment." I thrust my phone up, hitting record. "Smile for the camera, folks. My law firm pal's on his way. Oh, and Karen, you don't even know whose driveway you've blocked." Her smirk twitched as a sheriff's SUV rolled up, silent but menacing. The bulldozers paused, operators glancing nervously. Then, like a scene from a movie, Evelyn hobbled out of her ancient Buick, clutching a fat stack of yellowed papers. "Karen Peterson," she barked, her cane thumping the ground. "You just poked a bear you can't outrun." I grinned, pulse hammering. Karen wanted a fight? She'd get a war, and I was just getting started. I stood there, fists balled up tight, staring down the bulldozers hulking over my tomato beds like they were about to feast. Karen Peterson's smug grin was a knife in my gut, and Ryan Brooks, her slick lawyer sidekick, scribbled on his clipboard like he was tallying my defeat. Evelyn Carter, 80 years old and fiercer than a cornered bobcat, waved her stack of papers like a war banner. "You've got no clue what you've stepped into, Karen," she hollered, her voice slicing through the rumble of engines. Deputy Harris lounged against his sheriff's SUV, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. Neighbors pressed in, Mrs. Garcia muttering prayers, little Timmy Lopez filming on his phone, Mr. Jenkins nodding like he could taste the showdown coming. "Cut the theatrics," Karen snapped, tossing her head so her blonde bob gleamed in the sun. "This isn't a soap opera, Michael. Your garden's a disgrace, and it's history, right now." She waved at the operators, and the bulldozers growled louder, drowning out the morning quiet. My chest tightened as a rusty blade hovered over my seedlings, close enough to nick their leaves. "Stop!" I bellowed, lunging in front of the nearest machine. The operator, a bearded guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, froze, glancing at Karen. "You touch my plants, and you're all screwed deeper than you can imagine. I've got proof this land's mine, exempt from your garbage rules. Back off now." Ryan smirked, pushing up his glasses. "Nice try, Davis. The HOA covenant overrides whatever fantasy you're spinning. Section 6.9, full authority, no waiting." He gave Karen a nod, and she clapped like she was commanding an army. That's when Evelyn shoved her papers into my hands, her bony fingers shaking with righteous fury. "Show 'em, Michael. The 65 survey maps, your granddad's county deal." I grabbed them, my old lawyer instincts roaring to life as I scanned the faded lines. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, my buddy Chris Evans was probably weaving through Charlotte traffic on I-85, cursing every red light after my SOS text. "HOA lunatics with bulldozers. Bring the law. ASAP." "Check this out," I said, thrusting the maps up for the crowd to see. "My family kept rights when we sold to developers, utility easements, mineral claims, and the best part? This house is exempt from any HOA crap." I stabbed a finger at the boundary line cutting through Oakwood Heights. "Those bulldozers are on my easement. That's trespassing, Karen." Her smirk twitched, but she came back swinging, voice shrill. "That's ancient nonsense. The HOA's owned this place for 30 years. Your loophole's a fairy tale." She reached for the papers, claws out, but Deputy Harris stepped up, hand raised. "Ma'am, I'd cool it," he said, slow and steady, eyeing the growing mob. "Let's hear him out." The operators killed their engines, and the sudden quiet hit like a thunderclap. Timmy's live stream was blowing up, comments flashing. "Go, Mike. Karen's done." Evelyn leaned in, whispering, "Page 3, sugar." I flipped it open, and my breath caught. There it was, my granddad's signature locking in gold. 142. Oakwood Lane retains full autonomy from future covenants. I shoved it right in Ryan's face. "Read it and weep, Brooks." His cocky grin melted, sweat popping up on his forehead as he skimmed it. Karen's eyes bounced between us, her confidence splintering like a dollar store wine glass. This doesn't mean squat," she sputtered. "Start those machines." The lead operator climbed down, shaking his head. "Nope. Not risking my license on this mess without a judge's say-so." The crowd erupted. Mrs. Garcia clapped. Mr. Jenkins let out a hell yeah. And a fire lit in my veins. This wasn't just my fight anymore. Then a black sedan screeched up, tires smoking. Chris burst out, tie crooked, waving a fresh county printout. "Mike, you're untouchable. Certified docs. These idiots are cooked." He tossed me the packet, grinning like a kid on Christmas. Karen's face drained to a sickly white as Deputy Harris strolled over, flipping open his notepad. "Deputy," I said, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline screaming through me. "I'm reporting trespassing and attempted property damage." They rolled heavy machinery onto my land without a shred of right. Harris nodded, pin scratching, while Ryan muttered something urgent in Karen's ear. She jerked away, glaring at me like I'd just burned her kingdom down. "This isn't over, Michael," she hissed, low and lethal. "You think some dusty papers scare me? I'll drown you in legal fees. You'll beg me to take those plants." Evelyn cackled, leaning on her cane. "Oh, darling, you're the one drowning. And I've got more dirt than Michael's garden." She patted a thick folder under her arm, her eyes twinkling with trouble. My phone buzzed, Chris texting. "HOA financials." Evelyn's got the goods. Karen stormed to her car, Ryan scurrying behind, but she spun back, jabbing a finger at me. "Savor this, Davis. It's your last win." Her engine roared as they sped off, leaving a cloud of dust and gaping neighbors. I turned to Evelyn, my heart still pounding. "What's in that folder?" She grinned, all sass and secrets. "Swing by my place tonight, 7 sharp. Bring a calculator and guts. Karen's been fleecing us all, and I've got the proof." The crowd hummed. Timmy's stream hit 250 viewers, comments going wild. Mrs. Garcia threw her arms around me, whispering, "God bless you, Michael." I looked at my tomatoes, still standing proud. This wasn't just a garden now, it was a full-on uprising. And Karen had no idea the hellstorm she'd just kicked up. I barely ate dinner that night, My stomach was too knotted with anticipation. At 7 p.m. sharp, I banged on Evelyn's screen door, calculator in one hand, Chris's county docs in the other. She yanked me inside, her tiny living room stuffed with yellowed files and a pot of coffee brewing so strong it could wake a coma patient. "Sit," she barked, shoving a fat folder at me. "Karen's been bleeding us dry, look." I flipped it open, and my blood ran hot. Bank statements, sticky noted with red ink, showed the HOA siphoning $250 a month from every house, $150,000 total, for a pool upgrade that never happened. The pool still had the same cracked tiles I'd stubbed my toe on last summer. "Where's the cash?" I growled, scanning columns. Evelyn jabbed a page. "They're Peterson Brooks LLC. My jaw hit the floor. Transfers funneled straight to a company owned by Karen and Ryan. "They've been pocketing it for 3 years, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Over $150,000, Michael, our money." I slammed the folder shut, fury boiling over. "How'd you catch this?" "My late husband, Earl, was a CPA," she said, eyes glinting. "When Karen fined me $200 for my Easter wreath, called it too tacky, I got mad. Started digging through HOA mail nobody reads. Found the scam. Across town, Timmy Lopez's live stream from earlier was blowing up. 300 viewers now, comments raging. Sue her. Jail time." I grabbed my phone, texting Chris. "HOA's stealing. Meet me at Evelyn's. Bring your legal brain." Then Evelyn dropped the real bomb. "Last page," she whispered. I flipped it, and my heart stopped. A memo: Karen and Ryan plotting to jack up fines on 5 elderly neighbors, force them to sell cheap, then flip their homes for triple through their LLC. Evelyn's name was circled in red. "They're targeting me next," she said, voice steady but eyes fierce. "Vultures." Right then, Chris burst in, tie gone, hair wild. "Got your text. Holy crap, this is fraud." He snatched the memo, scanning it. "We can nail them. County prosecutor's office loves this stuff." My phone buzzed. "Karen's number?" I smirked, hitting speaker. "You're dead, Michael," she snarled, voice dripping acid. "Digging up dirt? I'll bury you first." "Funny," I shot back, "'cause I've got bank records saying you stole $150,000. Smile for the sheriff, Karen." She gasped, then the line went dead. Chris grinned. "She's spooked, perfect." Evelyn stood, cane thumping. "Call a neighborhood meeting tomorrow, 6 p.m., clubhouse. We end this." I nodded, adrenaline surging. This wasn't just about tomatoes anymore. It was a takedown. Next night, the clubhouse was packed, 80 neighbors crammed in, some standing, others spilling outside. I hooked my laptop to the projector, flashing the bank statements. "Karen and Ryan stole $150,000 from us," I said, voice booming. Gasps ricocheted. Pool fees, fake fines, all in their pockets. The memo hit the screen, Evelyn circled, and the room erupted. "Thieves," yelled Mr. Jenkins. "My shed fine was $400, chimed Mrs. Garcia. "Where are they?" someone shouted. "Invited," I said, "but they're hiding." Tells you everything. Chris stepped up. "We vote now, dissolve the board, elect Temps till we redo this right." Hands shot up, 78-0. Karen's reign was ashes. As folks signed the petition I drafted, my phone buzzed, security cam alert. I opened the app, and my gut twisted. Karen and Ryan, hooded up, were in my yard, yanking my tomato plants out by the roots, tossing them like trash. Karen smirked at the camera, mouthing, "You're next." I showed Chris. "Vandalism, add it to the list," he said, dialing Deputy Harris. The crowd swarmed my phone, fury buzzing. "She's unhinged," Mrs. Garcia cried. Evelyn grabbed my arm. "We've got her now, sugar. She just dug her own grave." I stared at the wreckage on screen, my plants shredded. Karen wanted war? She'd get annihilation, and I had a whole neighborhood behind me. I couldn't sleep that night. My trashed garden replayed on a loop in my head, Karen's smirk branded behind my eyes. At 3 a.m., my phone lit up with another cam alert. I bolted upright, heart slamming, and opened the app. There she was again, Karen, alone this time, smashing my kitchen window with a brick. Glass sprayed across my sink as she darted off, blonde hair flashing under the streetlight. I texted Deputy Harris. "She's back, caught on tape." Then I called Evelyn. "She's losing it," I said, voice shaking with rage. "Meet me at the station at 8, she replied, calm as steel. "Bring the footage. We've got her." By morning, Cedar Ridge was buzzing, 5 news vans parked on my street, reporters swarming. "Michael Davis?" a mic shoved in my face. Is it true the HOA president trashed your place after you exposed her? I nodded, showing the clip. She stole $150,000 from us. Now she's desperate. The reporter's eyes widened as neighbors spilled out, shouting their own Karen horror stories. At the sheriff's station, Deputy Harris watched the footage, jaw tight. Trespassing, vandalism, felony territory with her priors. He flipped through a file. County's already digging into the $150,000. Found withdrawals to offshore accounts. Peterson and Brooks are cooked. Evelyn smirked, handing over her folder. At this, proof they targeted me and 4 others for their scam. Harris nodded. Warrants are out. Stay sharp, she's cornered, and that's when they bite. As we left, my phone buzzed, unknown number. A text, you'll regret this. Watch your back. I showed Evelyn. Karen. She mused. Or Ryan. Either way, they're toast. Back home, I stepped over shattered glass, fury simmering. Then I heard shovels. 30 neighbors swarmed my yard, replanting my beds with tomatoes, peppers, even roses. Mrs. Garcia hugged me. She fined me $300 for my son's bike, screw her. Mr. Jenkins grinned, dirt on his face. My shed sting. Thanks to you. Timmy Lopez ran up, phone out. Streams at 1,000 viewers, people hate her. I laughed, chest loosening for the first time in days. You're all insane in the best way. Evelyn clapped my shoulder. We're family now, sugar. Karen messed with the wrong block. 2 hours later, Harris called. Got him. Karen was at a gas station off I-77, Ryan at a motel in Gastonia. Both in cuffs, screaming about lawyers. I grinned. Tell her to save it for the judge. That night, the news hit. HOA president arrested in $150,000 fraud scheme. My phone blew up, texts, calls, Timmy's stream spiking to 5,000. The next day, we voted, no more HOA. Instead, we formed the Cedar Ridge crew. Fair rules, no fines, gardens welcome. Karen's house sold a month later. New owners joined our crew, planting zucchini in her old yard. I stood on my porch, watching the sunset, Evelyn beside me. You flipped this place upside down, she said, smirking. Nah, I replied, we did. She started it. I just finished it. My tomatoes were sprouting again, green and defiant. Karen was gone, but the fight had forged something stronger, a neighborhood that wouldn't bend. Then my phone buzzed, another text, unknown number. This isn't over. I froze, showing Evelyn. She squinted. Some lackey, probably. Let him try. I nodded, but a chill crawled up my spine. The war was won, but was the battle really done? I thought I'd won. Karen and Ryan in cuffs, the HOA torched, my tomatoes thriving again. Cedar Ridge felt alive, neighbors laughing over backyard beers instead of cowering from fines. But that text, this isn't over, gnawed at me. 2 weeks after the arrests, I woke to a faint rustling outside at 2 a.m. My security cam app pinged, motion detected. I opened it, and my pulse spiked. A figure in a black hoodie stood in my yard, spray painting my garden beds. You'll pay. The camera caught a glint of blonde hair before they bolted. I called Deputy Harris, voice tight. She's back, or someone's doing her dirty work. He sighed. Karen's on bail, but she's got an ankle monitor. I'll check it. Send me the clip. I did, then texted Evelyn. Up for a stakeout? She replied instantly. Hell yes. 6 a.m., my porch. Dawn broke cold and gray. I met Evelyn, her binoculars trained on Karen's old house, now the Miller's place, with their zucchini patch mocking her legacy. Whoever it is, she muttered, they're dumb enough to think we'll fold. My phone buzzed. Harris. Karen's monitor says she's home, 10 miles away. Paint's fresh, someone else. Across town, Timmy Lopez was live again. His stream hit 7,000. Fans rabid for updates. Who's the hoodie? Comments screened. I smirked, texting him. Keep him guessing. Then Mrs. Garcia ran up, breathless. Michael, my shed. Someone slashed the tires on my mower last night. Mr. Jenkins joined, red-faced. My porch light smashed. This ain't random. I clenched my fists. Karen's got a proxy, someone local. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Her nephew, Joey. Lives 2 streets over. Punk kid, always kissing her ass. I remembered him. 20-something, greasy hair. Towed her car once when she forgot to pay parking tickets. We stormed Joey's duplex, Harris trailing us with a warrant fresh from the judge. The kid answered, bleary-eyed, paint flecks on his hoodie. What's this? He yelped as Harris cuffed him. Found your spray cans, genius, Harris said, bagging a half-empty red one. Matches Michael's video. Joey squirmed. She made me. Said she'd cut me off if I didn't. Cut you off from what? I snapped. He glared, then spilled. Her stash, $50K she hid before the cops got her. Said it's leverage to ruin you. My stomach dropped. Karen still had cash and claws. Harris hauled Joey off, but not before he sneered. She's got more coming. Watch your ass, Davis. Evelyn grabbed my arm. We need that money. Proof she's still pulling strings. I nodded, mind racing. Her old office, basement of the clubhouse. She locked it when she ran the HOA. That night, we rallied. Me, Evelyn, Chris, and 10 neighbors armed with flashlights. The clubhouse basement door was padlocked, but Mr. Jenkins brought bolt cutters. Screw her secrets, he growled, snapping it. Inside, cobwebs clung to file boxes. Then I spotted it. A metal lockbox, Karen's initials scratched on top. Chris pried it open, and cash spilled out. $50K in crisp hundreds, plus a ledger. I flipped it. Names, dates, payouts. Joey, $500. Tim's garage, $2K. My voice shook. She's bribing people, vendettas. Evelyn snatched a page. Look, $10K to RB, Ryan Brooks. Bail money. Chris whistled. They're rebuilding her war chest. Mrs. Garcia gasped. My mower. Tim's garage fixed it last month. The puzzle clicked. Karen's network was alive, hitting us from the shadows. My phone buzzed. Another text. Same unknown number. Found your little meeting. Say goodbye to your garden, again. I ran upstairs, flashlight beam bouncing, and froze. Through the clubhouse window, flames licked my yard, my tomato beds ablaze. Neighbors shouted, sprinting out. But I stood rooted, fury and fear colliding. Sirens wailed in the distance as Evelyn grabbed me. She's not done, Michael. But neither are we. The fire truck screeched up, dousing the flames, but my garden was ash. Harris arrived, face grim. Joey's singing. Says Karen's got one last play. Something big. I stared at the smoking ruin, resolve hardening. Let her try? We'll bury her for good. The smell of charred tomatoes hung heavy as I stared at my torched garden, firefighters hosing down the last embers. Deputy Harris's words echoed. Karen's got one last play, and I knew this wasn't just revenge, it was her desperate gasp. My phone buzzed nonstop, neighbors texting. We're with you. She's gone too far. Evelyn stormed up, eyes blazing. Joey's spilling. Let's hit her now. I nodded, fire in my veins. Clubhouse, 8 a.m., emergency meeting. Spread it. Chris was already on the phone with the county prosecutor, the $50,000 lockbox and ledger in evidence bags. They're tracing every dime, he said. Ryan's cut a deal, flipped on her for immunity. I grinned. Her castle's crumbling. By sunrise, Cedar Ridge was electric. 50 neighbors crammed the clubhouse, another 20 outside. Timmy Lopez streaming to 10,000 viewers. I took the mic, voice steady. Karen's done, arrested, broke, and her nephew's ratting her out. But last night, she burned my garden. She's hitting us where it hurts. I flashed the ledger on screen, payouts to local shops, Joey, even a councilman's aide. Gasps ripped through the room. Mrs. Garcia stood, trembling. Tim's garage, $2K bribe. They slashed my mower. Mr. Jenkins slammed his fist. She paid off my landscaper to snitch on my shed. The crowd roared. Anger, betrayal, unity. Evelyn stepped up, cane thumping. She targeted me, one in my house. We've got her cash, her plans, let's finish her. Harris burst in, badge gleaming. Karen's in custody, caught fleeing to South Carolina. Joey gave us her burner phone. She ordered the fire. He held up a baggie, red spray paint, matching my beds. Felony arson, fraud, conspiracy. She's facing 20 years. Cheers erupted, but I wasn't done. Her stash, I said, pointing to the lockbox. $50K stolen from us. I say we take it back, rebuild. Hands shot up, unanimous. Chris smirked. Prosecutors seizing her assets. House, car, savings. She's got nothing left. Timmy's stream exploded. 15,000 viewers, comments flying. Legend. Karen's toast. That afternoon, I led a caravan to Karen's old place. Now the Millers, where her nephew's truck still sat. Harris had a warrant. We searched it. Tucked under the seat. A burner phone with texts. Burn it. Make him bleed. Sent to Joey hours before the fire. I handed it over, my gut twisting with grim satisfaction. She'll regret this forever, I muttered. 2 days later, the prosecutor called. Plea deals off the table, Ryan's testimony plus this phone? She's going to trial. I grinned. Good. Let her face us. The news hit Charlotte stations that night. HOA tyrant faces decades behind bars. My inbox flooded. Neighbors, strangers, even a guy in Texas. You're my hero, man. A week later, we threw a block party in the Miller's yard. 100 folks, grills sizzling, kids racing through our new community garden. The $50,000 rebuilt my beds, fixed Mrs. Garcia's mower, replaced Mr. Jenkins's light. Every cent accounted for on a public spreadsheet I posted. Evelyn handed me a ripe tomato, her first harvest. You flipped this place, sugar, hero stuff. I laughed, biting into it, sweet, juicy, victorious. We all did. She messed with the wrong crew. Across the street, a for sale sign stabbed Karen's old lawn. Her last shred of power sold to a young couple who waved, joining us. Word spread. I was the guy who took down the HOA witch. People stopped me at the gas station, the grocery store. You're the tomato guy. Thank you. Then the kicker landed. Chris called, voice gleeful. Trial set, Karen's broke. No lawyer'll touch her. But get this. Inmates saw the news. They're calling her Garden Karen. She's already a punching bag in lockup. I pictured her, stripped of her blazer, her smirk, her kingdom, stewing in a cell, knowing Cedar Ridge thrived without her. Regret? She'd choke on it for decades. A month later, I sat on my porch, new plants blooming, peppers, zucchini, tomatoes thicker than ever. Timmy ran up, grinning. Streams at 20,000, wanna say hi? I took his phone, facing the camera. Cedar Ridge beat the tyrant. Plant what you want, live how you love, we're free. The chat erupted, king, hero. Evelyn shuffled over, smirking. Local legend, huh? I shrugged. Just wanted my tomatoes. She cackled. Sure, sugar, and you got a whole damn army instead. Karen was gone, locked up, penniless, a cautionary tale whispered in HOA nightmares. Her last text haunted me once. Now it was a trophy. I'd avenged us all, every fine, every tear, and turned a neighborhood into a fortress. Cedar Ridge wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. And me? The guy who fought for his garden became the guy who saved a community. If this story got you, write a comment about absurd HOA cases, and like if you like to win.